Hey everybody! In this video we are going to be reviewing the life of Elijah and figuring out what happens next in his story. So let's do some review about what we've learned so far in his story. So Elijah was a prophet for God, and remember, a prophet is just a messenger for God. So God would tell the prophet a message, and then the prophet had people that he needed to go and tell the message to. So Elijah had a message for King Ahab and Queen Jezebel and all of their people and the people of Israel. So Elijah went to King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, and they were really mean. They were not good, and they were very evil. And Elijah told them that they needed to stop worshiping idols, that they needed to worship the one true God. And then he told them that there would be no rain in Israel for a long time. And then Ahab and Jezebel didn't like what they were hearing from Elijah. So Elijah left, and he went to the woods, and God provided for him there. And he was able to go to a brook, which is just another word for a stream. So he had water, and he was able to get food because the birds would bring him food. So God provided for him there. And then Elijah met a widow and her son. And remember, this woman, she didn't have a husband because he died. So she was having a really hard time providing for her son, making him food and having enough food in the house to allow them to live. And so Elijah said, take your last batch of oil and flour, make a cake, and give it to me. And so Elijah took it and ate it, and God did a miraculous thing. He didn't allow this woman's flour and oil to run out until after the famine was over. So she was sustained by God, and her son was sustained by God, and God just did another miracle. But then, in our story, another crazy thing happened where this woman's son passed away, and she was so upset. But Elijah took the boy and he prayed to God, and God brought him back to life. And that was another miracle in this story. So Elijah was very close with God, and he prayed to God and gave glory to God every time, and God came through every time for him. Then another miracle that God provided in Elijah's life was when he was making an altar and putting a sacrifice on it against the prophets of Baal. Remember, all of those prophets that were for the fake god Baal, they had a competition where Elijah made an altar and put a sacrifice on it, and the people that were with King Ahab, who worshipped the fake god Baal, did the same thing. They built an altar, they put their sacrifice on it, and then they said, whoever God burns up the offering is the one true God. And so the prophets of Baal, the fake god, prayed, and they were yelling and doing just crazy things to get their fake god to light a fire on their sacrifice. And do you remember if it worked for the fake god and his people? No, it didn't work. It didn't catch on fire. But Elijah took water and he put it all over his sacrifice. And remember, water and fire don't mix. If something's wet, it usually can't catch on fire. But our God is so awesome that he ignited the fire, and he burned up the offering, and he burned up the whole altar, because Elijah prayed to him, the one true God, and God came through and showed everyone his power and showed everyone that he was the one true God, that he is the one true God. So let's find out what happens next in the story of Elijah. So Elijah is who we've been talking about, but he had a helper with him. And his helper's name was Elisha. Okay, so they have very similar names, but this is how we spell Elijah. Okay, so Elijah has a J in his name. Elisha is spelled a little differently. I'll write it here for you. This is how we spell Elisha. So Elisha has an SH. We know the SH says sh. So Elisha was Elijah's helper. Okay? So I will try to pronounce these names differently so that you can know who I'm talking about. Okay? So Elijah and Elisha were traveling, and they were going to different communities. And at each community, they went to 3. At each community, Elijah told Elisha to stay back. He didn't have to come in with him to the community. But every time they went to a new community and Elijah told Elisha to stay where he was, Elisha would say, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So every time that Elijah told his helper to stay outside of the community, Elisha would say that, and he would never leave Elijah. Okay? So they were really good friends, and Elisha was a really good helper. So Elijah was getting towards the end of his life. He was getting a little older, and he asked Elisha what he wanted because he knew that he was going to be with the Lord soon and he wouldn't be on earth anymore. And Elisha said that he wanted a double portion of Elijah's spirit. So the Spirit of God that comes over us, and that's what we know, how we are saved and that we are going to be with God forever. Elisha wanted a double portion of that. So, on their journey, they came to the Jordan River, and they didn't have a boat, but they needed to get across the Jordan River. So, Elijah took off his coat, and he put it on the river, and the river split, and they were able to walk through on dry land. So we learned about a story like that before while we were still in school. Do you remember who parted the Red Sea? It was Moses. So Elijah asked God the same thing, and God allowed him to part the sea, the river. So Elijah and Elisha walked across it on dry land, and then soon after that, there was a big commotion. And what happened was Elijah was taken to heaven in a fiery chariot. So Elijah never died. He never had to die or fall asleep on this earth. He just got to go up to heaven. So a chariot looks something like this. There's horses, and this is what Elijah was standing on, his chariot. So he just got taken up to heaven. He didn't have to die, which is so crazy. And Elisha is down here. He watched the whole thing happen. And remember what Elisha asked Elijah for? He wanted a double portion of his spirit. So let's see if Elisha got what he asked for. So later on, after Elijah was in heaven and Elisha was by himself now, Elisha had to go back across the Jordan River. Again, he didn't have a boat, and he didn't have Elijah with him. So, he still had Elijah's coat. So he used Elijah's coat, and he went back to the Jordan, and he hit the water with the coat, and the water parted into a path. So Elisha could go straight through it on dry land. And Elisha knew that God's Spirit had come upon him, and that God would be with him. Isn't that super cool? So just like in Psalm 23, when we say that we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever, that's just saying that we get to be with God forever. Even after we die, we get to be in heaven with God forever. And so Elisha knew the same thing when he knew that God's Spirit was in him too. So this was another crazy story. Elijah had a pretty cool life. So on this sheet that you're going to color today, you have it says Elijah in the fiery chariot, and your job is to find all of the squares, the circles, and the triangles. Okay? So you are going to color all of the squares that you find, you color them blue. Okay? And all of the circles that you find, color them yellow. And all of the triangles you find, color them red. Okay? Have a great time coloring and finding all of your shapes. See you later.